Chapter 3, Riptide. The waves were especially strong this morning, and Lauren took extra care to ensure that she was fully in her now moments, as she liked to call them. She watched the incoming tides and made sure there were others around on the beach, at least in case she ran into trouble. Can't be too careful in these waters, the old-timers had always told her, regaling on stories about shark attacks and dangerous undertows. She didn't have to wait long for the next wave, as they were coming in fast and furious every 10 seconds or so. She saw the next one coming, but she didn't have time to react, and she was pulled under by a strong draft current coming from underneath the heavy wave action. She struggled to right herself on the surface as her board tugged at her ankle. Now, Lauren Brisbane never got nervous. She applauded herself on that. But this undertow felt strong and ravenous, and she didn't want to become its latest victim. She was pulled under again, and instead of fighting against the pull of the current, she let herself be gently guided towards the shore. It didn't help to struggle. Laird Jenkins, surf pro extraordinaire and general old guy around town, had mentioned to her the last time they spoke about these things. Just let it take you, girl. If you're going to go, you're going to go. But 9 times out of 10, you can just drift in, he said, coming from experience. So Lauren let herself be taken by the drift. And it was in this space that her mind went free again. Well, if I die out here, she thought, at least I'll die in my favorite space, knowing my last day was filled with fine times. For a moment, Billy Tavish's face flashed before her eyes, and she almost wept at its fineness. Can't have 'em all, she thought to herself, as she could feel her feet coming into contact with the ocean floor. She was almost euphoric at the feeling of being held in the sea's embrace. And again she vowed to be a better person. Maybe someone up there is listening and can help me out a little bit, she said almost out loud. And at that moment, something shifted. Some small tiny bit of goodness crept in and deposited itself in her aura, saved for later in the spaces in between her anger and grief. For it was these things that deep down fueled her outrageous passions. Like an addict craving his latest drug fix, Lauren's crammed down emotions drove her sexual addictions and a lack of love both for herself and others. Her mind flashed briefly, and then she walked up onto the beach, sandy and spent from the struggle of the riptide. She saw a woman in her peripheral vision. When she turned to look, the figure was gone. But Lauren clearly saw a long red-haired beauty who seemed to be watching her. What in the world, she thought to herself. I've got to get to Brianna's before I lose it right here on the beach. She pulled her ankle strap loose and picked up the battered board, hoisting it over her shoulder and making her way back to the little Kia. And yet there had been a woman there, just not in the physical. There, like Lauren had thought. 5,000 miles away, Larimar McDougall had been looking out the window of the Chai House Tea Bar, waiting for Rowan to arrive. She loved to watch the waves come in as the sun set low beneath them. And for a split moment out of the corner of her eyes, she saw a buff, red-haired girl walking up onto the beach carrying a surfboard. She blinked, and it was gone. Lauren Brisbane disappeared into the ethers. And Larimar chided herself yet again for seeing this same red-haired ghost. Why do lost spirits always come to me, she thought to herself as she grew weary of waiting for Rowan. She headed upstairs to wait and thought that if he didn't show up soon, she was going to forego the whole evening out with him. At that thought, her cell rang, and she reached into her pocket for her phone. Rowan, in big letters, showed up on the caller ID, and she hesitated a split second before answering. She didn't want to sound agitated by his lateness. Who knew? Something terrible could have happened. But she was sure it was yet another of his lame excuses about being caught up at work. And then she began to wonder if he was still shagging his old lover, Alessandra, the possible stripper with the G-string teddy. Love, hey, it's me, Rowan sounded out of breath as she answered with a curt greeting. I'm so sorry, love, but I'm tied up here at the office. It's going to be another 30 minutes or so. You know how I despise these overseas calls, he said, sounding tired. Larimar heard the weariness in his voice and decided he was being truthful. It's okay, darling, she said, sounding a little upbeat now about the whole thing. Maybe we should do this some other time. It's getting late. I know, love, he said, disappointed. Oh, God. I had the best evening planned for us, but that's okay. I've got something even better, he said, sounding more excited now. How about I take some time off from this dreary place and we go away for a while? The question shocked her. Larimar had never been, quote-unquote, away with anyone before, and she didn't know what to make of it. Heck, it's my own business, Rowan said, seeing an idea take shape in his mind. I can take my own vacation whenever I want, he said happily now. I want to take you somewhere special, somewhere just the two of us for a while, he said, sounding sexy again. What do you say, girl? Will you go with me? Oh, my. Whew. But where, Larimar? Oh, my God. Sad, trying to come up with excuses in her mind. What if she left Rockaway Point and her spirit lover came to find her? At that, she immediately corrected herself. She knew those in spirit could be found anywhere, and location made no difference for telepathy and communication from beyond the veil. You know I have the tea house, she said, still deciding if she really wanted to go. Well, darling, I still have that condo in the States. It's pretty secluded up on the Oregon coast. I think you would love it there. Get out of that old tea house for a while. Heck, that's your own business. You should be able to get out of town for a few weeks, he said. I'll do all the things you want, he said, meaning more than just chores and such. And when Rowan decided to do anything for a woman, he meant just that. She would have anything she desired, both in bed and out. And it did start to sound good to Larimar. She got a brief flash of herself walking on unknown beaches, languishing in bed with her favorite real man lover. She could definitely afford to take a break. The chai house was simply a small part of Larimar's financial concerns. She came from old money, as it was called, and had quite an inheritance in the bank from her great-grandmother, Faith. No, she really didn't have to work at all, but she wasn't going to tell Rowan that. She'd had a few man friends who had tried to take advantage of her financial status for their own gain, and she vowed never to make that mistake again. Let them think I'm a little old spinster running a cute tea house, and that will show me that they really want me for me. She had decided after her last relationship with Darius McIntyre had gone wrong. Darius, deep down, had been a cunning narcissist who only wanted one thing, and it wasn't love. How Larimar had come across him she didn't want to recall, but she had always had a weakness for strong arms and ghostly eyes, and Darius had them both. Coming into the tea house every morning with a rose for her, he had decidedly wanted to get her attention, and oh, how he had done just that. He had ordered everything on the menu one day just to see what would happen. The end result was a huge tea house bill he really couldn't afford, and a first date with Larimar McDougall, who he'd had his eye on for a while now, and not necessarily for her looks, although they were quite acceptable and more. It was just her supposed fortune that his best friend had mentioned to him the first time they came here for an afternoon snack. You know, the owner of this place has a fortune on the side, his friend Kent had said, unknowingly passing on just the kind of news that would perk up good old Darius's ears. The thought of rich women gave him a hard-on, and he knew he had to get into this one in more ways than one. What's she look like? He asked Kent, quite unassumingly. Over there, the red-haired one with the sweater, Kent said, gesturing towards the kitchen, where Larimar had been whipping up a new dessert for the evening crowd. A bit spinsterly was all Darius could say out loud, but inside he thought that he could definitely, quote-unquote, do her. Plus the added bonus of a small fortune made him feel even more into it. I'm going to go talk to her, he had said to Kent, getting up from the table and wiping his shortbread-stained fingers on a napkin. First impressions count the most, he said, making sure to put on his best manly aura and wicked smile, knowing his power was something that always drew the women to him. And drawn she had come like a bee to honey. That first look at Darius McIntyre's ghostly blue eyes had reached out to Larimar like a beacon, and she had turned off any sense of intuition that told her to run like hell. The daily rosebuds and intense charm had definitely sealed the deal, and within a month of their meeting, they were a pair. Larimar and Darius were seen about town and going into Larimar's apartment at all hours of the night, not leaving until early morning, which didn't escape Raina and Claire's attention, since they always came in around 4 a.m. to make the scones and clean up anything left over from the night before. And Larimar was happy. She really was, she thought back to herself, basking in Darius's attention. However, his lovemaking skills left everything to be desired, as his best attempts to make her orgasm left her sweaty, spent, and generally unsatisfied. Still, she ignored her guidance and kept coming back for more of something that she wasn't quite sure. It was in looking back that she felt maybe she was under some sort of love spell that kept her enchanted with a man who was clearly only there for his own needs, a warlock with a lust for something beyond what her heart could provide. And several weeks into their courtship, if it could be called that, he had popped the question that made her run away fast. "So, love, how much do you make every year running this place?" he had asked with what seemed like nonchalance, but to Larimar seemed to be going somewhere. "Just asking," he had said, quickly retorted when she seemed taken aback by the question, and feeling bold and bigger than usual, he quickly dug his own grave in this relationship by saying his next words a little too emphatically. "Someone told me you were worth a fortune," he said, smiling and looking through her with those amazing blue eyes. Well, that's too bad, Larimar had thought to herself as she slowly got out of bed and put on her kimono to cover up her anger and her cold body. "That's not something I speak about to just anyone," she said, her feelings hurt. Her mother had warned her about this, but she hadn't wanted to believe that people were actually that cold. But here she was, experiencing being used firsthand for something she couldn't imagine. "I think you should leave now," she had said, with tears in her eyes and her hand on her heart. "Please don't call me again." Well, that didn't sound quite good, right? "Please don't call me again," she said, waiting there with eyes closed as he slowly got out of bed. She didn't want to see his body, which had so clearly been a turn-on, but that he really didn't know how to use very well. "But darling," he said in a half-hearted protest, starting to move more quickly, though, when he saw her walk into the kitchen and pick up the closest cast iron pan. And that was that. She had vowed since Darius McIntyre to be ever vigilant about who she talked to, about her innermost feelings and secrets. And that had started with Rowan, who wasn't really interested in that anyway, having built his own highly successful business. But it didn't hurt to be too careful. She would always remind herself whenever he brought up her earnings at the chai house. Feeling a little pulled down by a tide of ever-present emotions just under the surface of her heart that longed for her to just be herself with someone. The self that loved to dance naked in the summer rain out in the fairy fields, or the self that often liked to smoke a little peace pipe and sing old songs about the ancestors out by the fire pit. She had yet to find someone, although Rowan had come quite close. She still hadn't opened up to him about her deepest longings and desires. It was only in the heat of the night, when she was awakened by him, coming out of a restful but longing-filled sleep with dreams of her and her spirit lover curled up by that same fire pit as she sang old songs and danced naked under the full moon, their lovemaking filling her up with much-needed power and ecstasy that she never could feel in the real world. "What is happening to me?" she chided herself, shaking the whole vision from her mind. "Honey, are you there?" Rowan's voice interrupted her memories as he realized that she was doing that crazy daydreaming where her mind just completely closed him out while she thought about who knows who or what. "What? Oh, I'm sorry, love," she said, coming back fully from the thoughts of lovemaking by a fire pit. "Sure, let's go. I would love to," she said, almost wondering where that had come from. It was like someone else had said those words for her, and she wondered if her spirit guides were stepping in on her behalf. Chapter 4, Rosebuds. As she ended the call, Larimar realized she hadn't even thanked Rowan for the offer. Here he was trying to take her away on an amazing vacation, and all she could think about was spirit lovers and her financial status. She felt slightly guilty and hit redial on her phone. He answered quickly, and she poured her heart out to him in a nonsensical run-on sentence. "Look, Rowan, I just wanted to say thank you, dear. You've been nothing but kind to me, and I know that sometimes my actions may seem unclear to you, but I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciate you and all you do for me, and I wanted to say—" He cut her off there. "It's my pleasure, love. Isn't that what people do when they love each other?" he asked, or maybe he was realizing that he was actually saying it for the first time. "Yeah," he said, pausing. "It's what people do when they love each other. I love you, Larimar." There, he had said it first, and he stood there in silence, waiting to hear her response. Tears filled her eyes, and she wiped them away with the cuff of her sweater. She wasn't sure what to say next, so she simply said, "I love you too," and left it at that. "I'll call you in the morning, and we'll get all the plans laid out," he said, smiling from ear to ear. He was on cloud 9, and above, he thought. "You won't regret this, you know," he said huskily. "I know," was all she could manage to say as she ended the call. The tears flowed more freely now as she put her phone down and lay down on the bed, grasping for the feeling that was coming from her heart. She wasn't in love, and she knew it. Why did she say that, she wondered. She realized she had no idea, and between sobbing and chastising herself, she fell into a deep sleep. In her dream, she was standing in a rose garden. She was shielding her eyes from the amazingly bright sunlight. She had a feeling of intense and wonderful happiness and joy, but where was the feeling coming from? She wasn't sure. The dream went on, and she found herself inside a graveyard. She was beside her great-aunt's gravesite, and everyone was there throwing in rosebuds on top of the casket. Larimar was stricken then with immense sadness as she too tossed in a handful of rosebuds. She bent down to look inside the grave and reeled back in horror at her own body looking back at her. The dream shifted again, and she was standing at the Glastonbury Tor. Archangel Michael was standing in front of the Tor and beckoning her inside. She rose from her seat on the ground and moved, almost floated to him. He held out his hand, and then she saw something out of the corner of her eye. It was him, her lover, riding towards her on a white horse in the full battle regalia of a knight. She dropped Archangel Michael's hand, and went running full on towards him. She was getting closer to him as he rode swiftly towards her. They would soon be in each other's arms. He was so close now. She could see his eyes, those ghostly amber eyes looking straight into her soul. She could feel the burning in her heart and in her hips. They would soon be together again. Larimar awoke with a start as the shutters on her bedroom window banged against the side of the building. Darn it, she thought, as the dream began to fade. She wanted to be with him so badly. Why did she always get pulled out of her dreams to attend to something so silly as loose shutters? And why did her dreams seem so beguilingly familiar, yet so foreign to her? She had no answers as she pulled herself up from the bed to open the windows. Little to no answers. A love she had betrothed herself to in a different time and space was reaching out to her, and she had no inclination of how to get to him. And she had just pledged her love to a man whom she adored on many levels, but who she could never love like that. She wept again at the stupidity of it all, and yet the simplicity of what she must do. She must break up with Rowan and never see him again. She couldn't lead him on like that. She wasn't that kind of person, and she knew it. She couldn't pretend, and she knew that with his keen perception he would soon figure that out. She felt miserable and lay back down on the bed, falling into a dreamless sleep.